So, imagine you are just scrolling on your phone.
Yeah, like we all do pretty much every day.
Exactly. And you come across this video of a guy trying to sell a big Chungus internet meme to a, completely bewildered GameStop employee.
Oh, man. I mean, that is just random disposable internet distraction, right? The kind of thing you forget about
Yeah.
5 minutes later.
Right, totally. But, well, fast forward just a little bit, and that exact same 20-something college dropout is suddenly standing at the white-hot center of this massive political controversy.
Wow, wait, really?
Yeah, he is sparking these ferocious, national debates about religious enclaves, the American welfare system, and, the invisible boundaries of free speech.
That is just the ultimate modern whiplash, honestly. I mean, the pipeline from internet prankster to investigative journalist touching, the most radioactive rails in politics. You just don't see that everywhere.
You really don't. So welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack a single, highly provocative source.
Right, we're looking at a YouTube interview from Tucker Carlson's channel featuring this independent citizen journalist named Tyler Oliveira.
Exactly. And we're going to trace Tyler's bizarre path into journalism, his explosive claims about these insulated ethnic communities, and the really rapid financial deplatforming he faced.
Plus, we're going to get into the broader generational despair they talk about in this interview, which is super interesting.
For sure. But before we jump into all that, we really have to establish the rules of engagement for this specific conversation.
Yeah, this is super important. Absolutely mandatory disclaimer for you listening right now.
Yes. The source material we are breaking down today contains highly polarizing, politically charged views. It covers race, religion, immigration, and the welfare system.
And we are making it crystal clear right up front that we are taking absolutely no sides here. None.
Right. We are not endorsing, we're not validating, and we're not condemning any of these viewpoints. That is not what we do.
Our sole job is to impartially report on this. We're just analyzing the mechanics of the arguments, the timeline of the events, and the ideas, exactly as they are laid out by the speakers in that original interview.
Exactly. We are looking at the architecture of the controversy and, literally nothing else.
So to understand that architecture, you kind of have to understand the lens Tyler brings to the world in the first place.
Right. So Tyler is from Modesto, California, and he lasted in college for exactly 3 months before he just dropped out to do YouTube full-time.
3 months? Wow.
Yeah, just 3 months. And he spent his early 20s, charging Lime scooters and making these completely nonsensical videos.
Like what kind of videos?
Well, driving around in these blocky cars that look like they were pulled straight out of Minecraft. Just totally goofy stuff.
Okay, right. But then he develops what he calls this gas station interview format.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
So it's this very specific type of content where he just walks up to random people at gas stations and starts these really raw, kind of absurd conversations.
Just totally unscripted.
Exactly. And the pivotal moment for him is realizing that this highly engaging, unpolished format, it could actually be pointed at something real.
Right. He basically asks himself, what happens if I take this chaotic energy of a meme video and just drop it into a serious news event?
And his laboratory for that experiment was the train derailment and the chemical spill in East Palestine, Ohio.
Oh, I remember that. So Tyler noticed this weird discrepancy, right? Between the chaotic footage bubbling up on TikTok and the coverage from legacy media, which seemed, sterilized or even totally absent.
Yeah, completely absent in some cases.
So he didn't wait around. He just got in his truck in Austin, Texas, and drove all the way to Ohio.
No press pass, no pitch to an editor.
Nothing. He just showed up and started pointing his camera at locals and federal agents.
It is just a perfect illustration of how people are circumventing traditional media gatekeeping today. You don't need a master's degree from Columbia Journalism School to stand on the sidewalk and ask questions anymore.
No, you really don't. And that East Palestine video, it pulled in millions of views.
Millions.
Yeah, millions. It proved there is this massive, totally unmet hunger from the public for just unvarnished, on-the-ground reality.
People just don't trust the highly produced news packages anymore.
Yeah.
They actively want that messy, shaky cam perspective.
Absolutely. And I see a massive parallel here, honestly. Tyler's personal career evolution, it perfectly mirrors the evolution of the internet itself.
Oh, that's a great point. How so?
Well, the internet started as this deeply unserious playground, cat videos, random forums, goofy memes.
Right, the big Chungus era.
Exactly. And then, almost overnight, it mutated into this unfiltered, disruptive pipeline for serious, on-the-ground information. The infrastructure built for entertainment was just hijacked for raw news.
Yeah, the tools matured, and I guess the creators using them matured too.
Yeah.
Tyler actually explicitly mentions this in the interview.
What does he say?
He says he hit his early 20s and just realized he didn't want his legacy to be, you know, internet nonsense. So he started aiming his camera at the extremes of American society.
Like really fringe stuff, right?
Yeah, like a village of sex offenders in Florida, white supremacist compounds in Arkansas, black Hebrew Israelite gatherings in Harlem. He was actively hunting for the fringes.
Wow. But the real friction, the stuff that really blew up, starts when he moves from those absolute fringes to highly insular communities that are actually interacting with mainstream public systems.
Right. He turns his focus to how specific ethnic and religious enclaves interact with the American welfare system.
And the interview details his initial investigations into Somali communities in Minneapolis and Muslim-majority areas in Michigan.
Dearborn and Hamtramck, Michigan, specifically, are huge focal points in their discussion.
Yeah, and Hamtramck is super interesting, right? Because it transitioned from this historically Polish working-class town to actually electing a Muslim-majority township council.
And the interview highlights a very specific legislative action from that new council. They voted to ban the public display of the gay pride flag.
Which is a huge deal. The argument presented in the source is that this represents this stark failure of progressive immigration philosophy.
Right, the idea being that a demographic group was welcomed by white liberalism only to consolidate political power and immediately outlaw the symbols of that exact same liberalism.
Exactly. So Tyler's putting out these videos exposing what he frames as systemic welfare exploitation and cultural friction in these communities.
And what happens? The political right totally embraces him.
Oh, yeah. Republican politicians, conservative commentators, they are cheering him on. They view his work as this brave investigative journalism exposing fraud.
But Tyler claims his motivation isn't actually partisan. He says he operates on, like, universal principles.
Right. So he decides to test that. He applies that exact same aggressive investigative lens to a completely different demographic.
He goes looking for Jewish ethnic enclaves.
Yep. And he zeroes in on Curious Joel in upstate New York and Lakewood, New Jersey. These are communities dominated by Orthodox Jewish populations.
And the statistical picture he paints in the interview is just jarring.
It really is. We are talking about towns with poverty rates hitting 40% at various points, families routinely having, 7 to 10 children.
And an anomalously massive reliance on government assistance programs, things like Medicaid, SNAP, and Section 8 housing.
Right. And if you are paying local taxes in these areas, understanding the mechanics of this is crucial. Like, how does a community hit a 50% voluntary unemployment rate among adults and still function?
Well, Tyler's on-the-ground interviews reveal this cultural structure where studying the Torah full-time is just the absolute priority.
Yeah. And when you have a massive family and zero official taxable income because you are, engaged in a religious study, you legally qualify for almost every poverty assistance program the state offers.
It's a systemic maximization of the social safety net. And it extends deeply into local infrastructure, too, specifically public schools.
Oh, the school part is wild. The interview really dives into the New Jersey state funding formula.
Right, because state law dictates that a public school district has to provide transportation and special education services for all students in its borders,
regardless of whether they attend public or private schools. So let's break down the sheer logistics of that for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
When an insular, high birth rate community moves in, their children overwhelmingly attend private religious schools, the yeshivas.
Right.
But the public school budget is still completely on the hook for their busing. And because of strict religious practices, these yeshivas require gender-segregated transportation.
Which means the public district literally has to run twice as many buses to the exact same private schools just to keep the boys and girls separated.
Exactly. And the argument made in the interview is that this legal obligation functionally bankrupts the public school system.
It just drains resources away from the heritage resident who actually rely on the public schools.
Right, ultimately forcing them to move out because their local taxes are funding a private religious infrastructure they can't even participate in.
But I have to challenge the framing of this as fraud for a second, just to push back a bit.
Oh, for sure. Go for it.
Because if a massive corporation hires a team of lawyers to find every conceivable loophole in the tax code to pay $0 in federal taxes, we usually just call that savvy business practice, right?
Yeah, that's true. People say they're just playing by the rules.
Exactly. So if a religious community utilizes the exact legal parameters of the welfare system to fund their isolated lifestyle, why is it suddenly parasitic? Aren't they just playing the game by the exact rules the state wrote?
That is the fundamental philosophical tension of this entire discussion right there. The
Wow.
interview really highlights this massive collision of worldviews.
Break that down for me.
Okay, so on one side, you have a strictly legalistic worldview. The community in Lakewood argues, look, the law is written in a way that qualifies us for these benefits, so we are going to take them, period.
And on the other side, what are Tucker and Tyler arguing?
They argue from the perspective of the social contract. Their premise is that welfare was designed as an emergency safety net for the indigent, like a temporary bridge during hard times.
Not a subsidized lifestyle.
Exactly. It was never intended to be a permanent business model for a community that intentionally removes half of its adult workforce to study religion while having 10 kids.
Right. Tucker actually brings up the concept of shame in the interview.
Oh, yeah. He argues that a healthy society relies on citizens feeling a moral obligation to avoid welfare unless it's absolutely necessary, not optimizing it, you know.
Right, and the resentment from the surrounding tax base is just inevitable when that happens.
Tyler makes a really pointed comparison here. He says if a group of white Americans attempted to build an exclusive, racially segregated town in the Ozarks using Section 8 vouchers to keep everyone else out.
The federal government would destroy them under the Fair Housing Act in days.
Exactly. Yet he claims these enclaves are achieving de facto segregation entirely subsidized by public funds.
So he publishes this video on Curious Joel. He puts it out there.
Yep. And this brings us to what we can call the hypocrisy test.
Because the reaction was the polar opposite of his Muslim and Somali investigations.
Completely. The exact same political factions that were cheering his investigative rigor just days prior suddenly labeled him entirely radioactive.
The Anti-Defamation League stepped in.
Yeah, the ADL accused him of trafficking in ancient anti-Semitic tropes about Jewish people being a drain on society.
And Tyler's defense to that is pretty straightforward. He asks, how can citing publicly available state welfare statistics and just asking citizens on a public sidewalk what they do for a living be considered anti-Semitic?
Right. But honestly, the real story here isn't just the rhetorical backlash. It is the sheer speed of the institutional immune system.
The deplatforming was just immediate and comprehensive.
We are talking within 24 hours of the Curious Joel video going live. Patreon, which is the platform Tyler relied on for his independent funding, they completely deleted his account.
Was there a strike system?
Oh, wow.
A warning?
No. No warning, no appeal process. They just cited bullying in their terms of service, and he was gone.
Which is pretty absurd when you think about his past content. Tyler actually brings up a previous video where he physically rushed the stage of Benny Hinn.
Oh, the massive Christian megachurch pastor.
Yeah. He grabbed the microphone, called the man a snake oil salesman to his face in front of the entire congregation, and was physically tackled by security.
And what was Patreon's reaction to that video?
Absolute silence. 0 bans for physically confronting a Christian pastor.
Wow. But filming public sidewalks and asking about welfare statistics in an Orthodox Jewish community triggers an immediate erasure of his financial livelihood.
It really reveals that terms of service are almost never applied objectively. They function way more like automated tripwires protecting specific groups.
And it wasn't just Patreon either. Tyler is pretty tech-savvy, right?
Yeah, he used AI to quickly code a replica of a crowdfunding site just to keep his business alive.
Right.
He hosted it on a server company called Hetzner.
And what happened?
Within days, Hetzner banned him.
So he moved again.
Yeah, he moved to another server provider, Vulture, and they banned him too, citing hate speech and ban evasion.
Honestly, if you are listening to this, you really need to consider your own digital footprint. Because we are not just talking about getting kicked off Twitter here.
No, this is full-on digital redlining.
Exactly. The entire back-end infrastructure of the internet, the payment processors, the web hosts, the foundational servers they coordinated to exile him.
It shows that if you step on the wrong invisible landmine, your ability to conduct commerce in the modern age can just be vaporized overnight by these unaccountable tech monopolies.
It's terrifying. And the interview paints a picture of a deeply balkanized set of rules. The source argues that in modern identity politics, you can openly mock Christians or critique white working-class demographics endlessly with 0 institutional friction.
But other demographics possess this invisible protective shield.
Right. And that shield isn't just digital. Tyler actually experienced it on the ground in Lakewood as well.
Oh, you mean the confrontation with the Shamarim?
Yes, exactly. The interview details his run-in with this volunteer religious police force.
They drive these vehicles outfitted with red and blue flashing lights,
Right.
visually mimicking actual law enforcement.
Yep. And Tyler claims they actively intimidated him, they shadowed his movements, and they were instructing residents not to speak with him on the street.
He also states that the official local police pulled him over simply for looking suspicious while he was legally filming on a public street.
So you essentially have a parallel society operating with its own localized law enforcement, entirely insulated by local political power, and vigorously defended globally by tech monopolies.
It's wild. And this micro example of balkanization leads directly into the macro conversation Tucker and Tyler have toward the end of the interview.
Right, about the really dark future of the country. They pivot to Generation Z, which is Tyler's demographic.
And the picture he paints is incredibly bleak. He describes a generation that is just paralyzed by economic despair and demoralization.
They did everything they were told, right? They followed the traditional script, go into massive debt to get a college degree.
Only to find those degrees are completely detached from actual earning power in today's economy.
And it isn't just domestic competition causing it. The interview introduces this fascinating concept of human quantitative easing.
Oh, that is a brilliant but terrifying analogy.
Break it down for the listener.
Sure. So in economics, quantitative easing is when a central bank prints money, floods the market, and devalues the currency.
Right.
Tyler applies this exact concept to the labor market via H-1B visas and mass immigration.
The argument being that the corporate establishment is intentionally flooding the American market with foreign labor to artificially suppress wages.
Exactly. Young American graduates aren't failing because they lack skills. They're being systematically undercut by a system designed to devalue their labor.
And that economic hopelessness drives this physical and cultural balkanization. Tucker and Tyler observe that anyone with capital is just abandoning these decaying, crime-ridden urban centers.
They are fleeing to places like Bozeman, Montana, buying up massive properties and building physical walls between themselves and societal collapse.
But if you are part of Gen Z and you don't happen to have millions of dollars to buy a mountain retreat, you are just left behind in the wreckage.
And the source material is highly specific about who feels most abandoned by this dynamic.
Yeah, Tucker and Tyler argue that white men, particularly those from the working class, are experiencing a really unique form of disenfranchisement here.
Their perspective is that this is the singular demographic actively penalized for exhibiting any in-group preference, while simultaneously being held collectively responsible for all these historical grievances.
Tyler actually uses the phrase algorithmically filtered out.
What does he mean by that?
He argues that corporate diversity quotas and hostile political rhetoric have basically convinced young white men that the system is completely rigged against them.
So instead of fighting a losing battle, they are simply opting out.
Exactly. They are retreating to their parents' basements, consuming digital media, and refusing to participate in a society they feel actively despises them.
Which perfectly circles back to why independent creators like Tyler has such massive influence right now.
Right. When an entire generation of young people looks at legacy media, the universities, both major political parties, and they just see institutions that ignore their economic reality.
Or actively view them with contempt.
Right. They abandon those institutions entirely. They gravitate toward rogue, independent voices who actually articulate their unspoken anxieties.
They want someone who is willing to touch the radioactive topics.
Yeah.
Because the polite, sanctioned conversations have yielded them absolutely nothing.
The energy in a society doesn't just evaporate, you know? If the established pipelines are clogged, the pressure builds until it creates a new channel.
Absolutely.
So let's kind of look at the totality of what we have covered today. We tracked the journey of a kid who realized charging scooters wasn't a legacy.
He bypassed the traditional journalistic gatekeepers and used internet-native tactics to investigate how insular communities optimize the welfare state.
Right, and we examined how his application of a universal critical standard exposed intense partisan double standards.
Which led to a coordinated stack-level erasure of his digital livelihood by tech platforms acting as an institutional immune system.
And finally, we saw how his individual conflict highlights a much larger generational crisis. Gen Z grappling with devalued labor, human quantitative easing.
And a rapidly balkanizing America where you either buy your way out of the chaos or you just get left behind.
Exactly. And if you are listening to this, you've probably noticed this shift in your own life. I mean, the era of 3 TV networks deciding what reality is, that's dead.
Long gone. Information, raw cultural friction, investigative reporting, it's all decentralized now.
Delivered straight to your phone by independent actors who answer to no editor. And this completely forces our hand as consumers of information.
We have to constantly evaluate our own biases and really scrutinize the mechanics of how we get our news.
Because the boundaries of free speech are shifting literally beneath our feet.
It creates a fascinating paradox about the nature of power in the digital age, doesn't it?
It really does. Think about it. The internet democratized the camera. It allowed a kid making meme videos to challenge legacy media and expose uncomfortable realities without needing anyone's permission.
The traditional gatekeepers lost their power to control a narrative.
But as we saw with the instant coordinated bans from Patreon and the server hosts, that power didn't disappear, it just migrated.
Right.
So here is something for you to mull over. If traditional media can no longer dictate who gets to report the news, but unaccountable tech monopolies can instantly erase a reporter's ability to buy groceries with zero due process, who actually holds the power to define reality today?